Cool. Thank you, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here opening up the show this evening. For those of you who don't know us, Melissa and Chris, we co-founded Medacity 4 years ago, and which we currently run out of our third floor dining room, just up the street at 11th and Commercial. But we tell stories for a living, and tonight we're here to tell you a little story about how we came to write a book. Two Canadians wrote a book about a nation of 18 million people for whom cycling's been made remarkably unremarkable.
So we thought it was important to begin at the beginning. These two adorable creatures are us at a much younger age. Cycling was basically a part of growing up for us, being kids of the 80s. We rode around everywhere in our neighborhoods, rode around to meet each other when we met in high school, and subsequently rode through university and into our first jobs when we lived in Guelph, Ontario. And yeah, bikes were just perfectly normal and nothing really unique until
we moved to Vancouver and cycling suddenly became a thing. These were the types of people that were using the streets of Vancouver. These were the type of people that we would see in the media, in television, newspapers. And this was the imagery that was being used by nonprofits and by cycle advocates. And we didn't feel like we were being represented at all. And the type of cycling we were doing was a far cry from the kind of hunched and helmeted that you see on your screen here. So we set about changing hearts and minds through the simple act of presenting a different type of imagery.
So for my part, essentially when we sold our car in 2010, I started getting around with our kids who at the time were 1 and 3, predominantly by bike. I could be seen around the city with either a trailer or a cargo bike, or the kids on their own bikes as they got older. And eventually got tired of answering the same questions as to how I made that work, and so started blogging in 2012 about my story and stories of parents just like me who made cycling work for them.
While Melissa was off on her own journey into bike advocacy, I had found a collection of friends, and we had formed the Vancouver Cycle Chic blog, and we, in response to the kind of bikelash that was happening in Vancouver, we set about telling positive stories about friends we knew who had started cycling as a result of the new bike lanes, and businesses we knew that were benefiting, and that was through photography, that was through writing, and that was through a series of short films we produced called the Cycle Chic Films.
So skip ahead, and as was mentioned, Chris and I formed Medacity in 2014, and the mission was still to keep telling stories, and we always felt that we couldn't tell the true cycling story without visiting the Cycling Nation. And so in 2016, we packed up our kids and went to live in the Netherlands for 5 glorious weeks, experiencing 5 different cities and learning just what it was like to live in a nation where cycling was normal and just part of the everyday. And this was what we experienced. There is sound, but it's okay if it doesn't work. So what's missing here is there's a gentleman actually just behind the camera over here whistling a little tune, and that's all you can hear because it's so quiet and so serene. So the first stop on our journey was to the city of Rotterdam, and it seemed like the perfect place to start. Rotterdam was bombed in World War II and was basically left with a blank slate that planners then took to create the modernist dream of wide streets, tall buildings, moving cars, instead of moving people. And then due to citizen activism, but also due to the 1970s OPEC oil crisis, realized they needed to retrofit and took that space and transformed it into these beautiful wide cycle tracks and ample public space that we got to enjoy while we were there.
From there, we took the train down to the southeast of the Netherlands to Eindhoven, which was a city with a really rich industrial past. It was the home to the Philips electronic company for 100 years until they packed up and moved out of town and found themselves in a rather grave economic crisis. But instead of kind of wallowing in that, they rebranded themselves as a more progressive city, from a car city to a cycle city, and built the Hohenring you're probably familiar with, the Van Gogh Starry Night bike path, and our personal favorite, which is John Cleese's Silly Walks Tunnel in the bottom right corner there.
And of course, no trip to the Netherlands is complete without stopping in Amsterdam, and we spent 10 days there riding around on extremely busy cycle tracks. I know many people are usually pretty nervous about riding in Amsterdam, but we can attest that even our 7-year-old did it, so it is possible. And what we started to learn while we were there was that Amsterdam that we experience today narrowly avoided, similar to Vancouver, a very different fate due to a single vote deciding whether or not a highway would bisect the city. So we were very grateful to enjoy that, but also it was a stark reminder that just with a single vote we could have experienced something very different.
The fourth and our family's favorite spot was Utrecht, which is about 50 kilometers south of Amsterdam. And it's kind of very similar to Amsterdam, but maybe at 3/5 scale. The buildings are a little smaller, there's fewer tourists, but there's still plenty of canals, and they're doing what we felt a lot more around cycling. They had recently built a school with a cycle path on the roof that goes up to a beautiful cycling bridge. They've done very well connecting their bikes and their public transport system, where they're currently just about to open the largest bike parking garage in the world. And they're also home to the busiest cycle path in the Netherlands, down there in the bottom right, which moves 38,000 people on bikes each and every day.
Our last stop on our journey was to the northern university town of Goningen. There we had the privilege of getting to experience what a truly trafficked calm city center was, due to the traffic circulation plan that was passed in the 70s that made it next to impossible for cars to get from one corner to the other without going all the way around the city center. And our experience there was, it was quiet, it was so calm and peaceful. We missed student season, we got there just after university let out, so it was a little quieter, but I think you can see that it wasn't that quiet when it came to bikes, but it was just a great way to end our journey.
So we came back and we wrote 5 articles for Daily Hive, and we never really felt we got to tell the full story. So through a mutual acquaintance, we found ourselves connected with Island Press. They're a nonprofit publisher in Washington, D.C. And they helped us refine our book pitch into not just telling the Dutch story, but telling the story of North American cities that were following in their footsteps. So we had a chance to delve into what Calgary was doing around cycling, building a downtown cycle track network, our hometown of Vancouver, Boston, New York, and other cities such as Seattle and Portland, which formed the basis for this book, which was published at the end of August.
So yeah, oh my God, we wrote a book. We're really proud of it, not just because we got to finish telling the stories that we wanted to tell about the lessons that the Dutch can offer for us, but also because we got to learn not just about the Dutch, but also about some of the great things happening here in North America, because we so often hear that what happens there can't happen here, and really it is, and we're on a great momentum, and we feel like this is just one step in a larger push to get cities to recognize that.
So, we just got back from a 2-week, 8-city tour of the US and Canada, and after every presentation we gave, we always were asked the question, well, what's next for Medacity? And we kind of had to coyly give them a non-answer because we were working on some plans that we were keeping private at the time, but tonight feels like as good a venue as any to reveal them, and that's that I've accepted a job with a prominent cycling organization in the Netherlands, and Melissa and I will be packing up and moving from Vancouver to Delft in March, which is very exciting for us. It's a new country, a new language, and a new challenge that we're excited to take on.
All right, so thanks for listening. That's us. As you've been told, we wrote a book. We will have copies for purchase in the intermission and later on in the evening. One thing that we'd like to leave everyone with is just a recognition that just because the Dutch had a 50-year head start does not mean that we can't achieve the same things here. We can learn from the lessons that they can offer us, learn from their mistakes. And we like to leave everyone with an adapted Chinese proverb that the best time to build a cycle track is 20 years ago, but the second best time is now.